Greetings, everyone. This is the Cosmic Consciousness Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Daniel Sage. And today we are speaking with a friend of mine that I've had acquaintance with, known closely, intimately for about 40 years, Patrick Holwell. Brief bio on Pat. I call him Pat. Patrick Holwell has served as a vocational counselor and later an economist over a career spanning several decades in local government. He earned his Master of Arts from the University of Colorado at Denver and has dedicated his professional life to waging peace against economic violence. For the past 15 years, he has walked the path of Hermetic initiation and is committed to helping raise the level of human consciousness through focused intent. And so, in fact, one of the things we want to talk about is an essay that you wrote for our little Institute of Noetic Sciences group that talked about, I think the title of it was The Mechanics of Consciousness, but I want to really explore, first of all, what I think has been your own personal journey with Franz Bardon and the Hermetic initiation process, all as a way to get to some understanding and maybe even a concrete definition of what consciousness is and what maybe cosmic consciousness is. So anything else that you want to say about yourself, go ahead and feel free to add on too. But if you could talk a little bit about your journey with Franz Bardon and Hermetic initiation, that'd be really cool.
Sure. Maybe 15, 20 years ago, I was reading a book called Stalking the Wild Pendulum. I forget the name of the author, but it's about the unified field theory, physics and, the quantum mechanics and stuff. And I ran across the word hermetic, and I was like, well, what is that? What does that even mean? So I looked it up, and I found out that it refers to a fellow named Hermes Trismegistus, or Hermes the Thrice Great. And there is a metaphysical meaning of that thrice great, because there are three planes of existence. There is the physical plane, with these clay vessels that carry around our souls and spirits. Then there's the astral plane, or the emotional characteristics that you have. And then there is the mental realm. And then, of course, there's the spiritual realm above that. But Hermes and any Hermetic initiate is going to try and be a master of himself or herself at all three of those levels. So in other words, body, soul, and spirit. So that's kind of how it started. And I ended up doing a lot of stuff. I'm an esoteric Christian, so that's going to be my frame of reference when I use examples and analogies in the course of this interview. But I ran across a Czech mystic named Franz Bardon, and he wrote 3 volumes of the first is Initiation into Hermetics, and he wrote that in 1956. And then he followed up with 2 volumes, one on evoking spirits, and then the other on the key to the true Kabbalah, which is kind of a cosmic language deal that operates using vibration, sound and color vibration, because everything vibrates. There is always a vibration, even when one is still. And the stuff of life, I've always felt that God isn't some old guy sitting in a throne. God is a force, a creative force that is uncreated. In other words, it has always been, is now, and ever will be. And it's kinetic energy, kinetic life energy, which we could think of as love, perhaps. But anyway, I went in through the initiation into Hermetics, and that starts with a theory section in which Bardon states something that's really interesting. He says that it's a magical, mystical journey, but the ultimate objective is oneness with the divine. He calls it divine providence or God. And so Orthodox Christians know it as theosis. And, other religious paths call it, but it's basically cosmic consciousness. That's the objective of the whole thing. Whatever powers of human intent that you gain, as a result of the study of it, are kind of sidelights, because it's meant to lead you to oneness with the divine, that cosmic consciousness, as you live your life here. So anyway, Bardon starts with mastery of your own soul. Everybody's got characteristics, Dan, that they have that don't serve them well. Like, for instance, what if you get mad, get all bent out of shape at, some little thing that happens, and you're hitting the gosh darn it trail and yelling and so on and so forth? That doesn't serve you. It doesn't help. And so what you have to do is practice a thing called spiritual alchemy, using a set of specific techniques, which include things like affirmations. So we're not talking anything strange here, but basically you use affirmations, you use pore breathing, you use the magic of eating and drinking, you use washing to get rid of these things that don't serve you, like pride and lust and anger, and other distractions that you may have, any addictions that you may have. You get rid of those and you change them or transmute them using these techniques into their corresponding virtue. So, for instance, anger may become patience. Pride may become humility, right? And so gluttony may become temperance. And these things then you create, the whole thing is about inner balance. Because if everything's polarized, so you have passive or negative characteristics, and you have positive characteristics, and both are important because both teach. And the objective always is raising human consciousness. Now, most people don't really grow in their consciousness very much over a lifetime. But through these methods, you actually can. And so, go ahead.
Don't forget what you're going to say. But
oh no,
I think one of the things that's going to happen as we go through, and I know that it's going to come up in all these podcasts, is, okay, well, how do we define consciousness, higher consciousness, and cosmic consciousness? I know I've got my own definition, and it'll obviously thread through all of our conversations. But when we want to define what higher consciousness is, because that may be something that we personally aspire to, and also is something that we would hope to inspire or become a catalyst for that kind of growth in other people as well, it's probably good to have some kind of a handle on, what you mean by that. I've got my own definition, but what do you? How does that come across for you?
Well, at the basic level, consciousness is the way you perceive the environment around you through your five senses, and intuition, which can legitimately be called a sixth sense. So that, that's just your basic personal consciousness. But let's ask a couple of questions about that. Where does that consciousness reside? Is it in your brain? I don't necessarily think so. I think the consciousness operates through brain synapses, but it is beyond just the brain. It exists, and I don't know where it's seated, but I think that there is a individual consciousness that we have. There may be a community or tribal consciousness that we have, and there may be a vast species-wide consciousness. Because if you think about you as a human being, you're made up of millions of tiny cells, right? Well, the human species is made up of billions of tiny cells each of which is a human being. And so that human species itself has a consciousness, which is then part of the consciousness of the Earth, which is a planetary type of consciousness that encompasses all life on the planet, as well as the planet itself. And then, of course, beyond that, you have a cosmic consciousness. And I suppose what I could say here is that most truly successful people that I have ever known are mission-driven. They're trying to do something, and the most successful people are trying to do something for others. Because the first huge step in uplifting your consciousness is when you stop pounding your chest and saying, me, and you start saying, us. Let us be together. Let us collaborate. Let us cooperate. Because that's what's kept the human species from going extinct over millions of years, is that we're not rugged individualists. We work together so that the tribe, the group, can compete.
Yeah.
Did that
Okay,
make sense?
so that's very helpful. So then now we'll go back to your journey with Bardon and talk about how that was awakened in you, and what is, and maybe pick up where I sort of interrupted you, where you're talking about, okay, we're talking about being growing our own consciousness to higher levels, hopefully to a cosmic level, and then what that means for the people around us. So,
Well, I've always felt that salvation, which is a central Christian tenet, is collective, not singular. I'm unwilling to just pound my chest and say, oh, I'm saved. The devil take the rest of you. No. We have to work together to achieve that real sense of community, physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. Those communities are really important. And the thing that got me into this whole path as a seeker is that I remember one time, long ago, back in the days, the first decade of our acquaintance, our church burned down. The church building that I was attending burnt down. And, they raised money, everybody worked really hard. Finally the church was done. And I don't want to sound irreverent here, but I remember I walked in and I'm sitting in this brand new folding chair that has a wonderful cushion. I'm comfortable, everything's great, and it smells beautiful, like new construction. Carpet and new paint, and it was great. And the sermon's droning on in the background, and I'm sitting there looking around at the new building and taking in all the ambiance of the new construction. And all of a sudden the thought came to me, okay, where do we go from here? What's next? I mean, is it enough just to go to a service every week and worship and then go out and live your life as if it was a separate compartment, this worship, and then you live your life in the way of the world? Well, what good is that? How does that really serve us? And so I wanted more than that. And when I found the Bardon path, that answered a lot of questions for me, because it's all about your own hard work, purifying your own soul. Franz Bardon uses the words in his theory section of Initiation into Hermetics. He says the first thing we all have to do is sweep our souls clean of filth. And what he meant by that is, irascibility, excessive pride, whatever it is that doesn't serve you, that doesn't help you. Because ultimately, when you're talking about raising consciousness, you go beyond me and you start talking about us, but then your consciousness grows to understand these relationships and this community, this sense of community that you have with others. Did that even make sense?
yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Helps understand your own personal journey a little more. So, other ways in which that has intersected with And, and you can even talk about your work
Okay.
life a little bit, but as a way to connect it with this whole theme of cosmic consciousness, you wrote a really great essay. In fact, I have um, identified it for other people that have joined our Institute of Nordic Sciences community group as a kind of our mission statement. And the title of it is Mechanics of Consciousness. So, what, in terms of not just Bardon, but anything else from your journey, your personal quest for higher consciousness, engaging other people who are on similar paths, how did that process, how did that come up for you in a way that, because I know you've written a lot of stuff, but I'm thinking specifically, how did that come together as a stimulus for writing Mechanics of Consciousness?
Okay, I can talk a little bit about that. This whole Bardon thing is a painstaking process because you're transmuting these characteristics, but then when you're done with that and you've achieved a basic inner balance, you then begin working with other forces, like he uses the traditional Greek elements: air, fire, water, and earth, as well as the electric power and the magnetic power, and then the electromagnetism. And all of that, Nikola Tesla had the Tesla coil, and he theorized that the earth itself produces enough electricity where we could actually build a system where we could get unlimited electromagnetic power from the earth itself to power our civilization. Of course, they couldn't figure out how to make money off that, so that kind of disappeared when Tesla died. But the point is, the forces are there, and they're common force. Like, for instance, fire, the element of fire isn't really like a campfire. That's the physical aspect of it, but it's expansive. It's hot. It's passionate. And the bottom line of the fire element is will, volition, right? Then you have the water element, which is about love and relationships. And, just kind of knowing, it's like omnipresent. You just kind of know everything about things because you're everywhere and you love anyway. That's fire, or that's water. And then air is freedom and joy and climbing up, and raising, uplifting yourself above the turmoil of daily life and looking beyond, and then earth is stability, just the ability to be practical and so on. So those are the basic things that you're working with as you go. Now, when I got through that, and I got into the later steps of that, I had some initiatory experiences that were, I won't really talk about in detail, but appeared to me in the form of very strong intuitions and dreams. But then I read Masaru Emoto about water, and he had this thing where he wondered, okay, if water is chlorinated versus clean spring water, will its crystallization patterns when it's frozen be different? And what he found was, yes, it is, but he also found that music, emotions, words, even the written word, will affect the way water freezes. So I started, my daughter and my ex-wife developed a way to replicate what Emoto did, because of course he quick froze it and then did it under a microscope, and we don't have that capability. So we figured out how to do it in petri dishes with our freezer. And that's how we did it. And I found I was able to charge a petri dish with a measured amount of water in it with the fire element force, the earth element force, and so on. And I got I was able to replicate that. And each Petri dish froze differently depending on the power of intent that I was applying to it. And I was like, yeah, that's so cool, And then I forget what happened. Oh, I know. I was working on a big project at work, and I got COVID like right before the home stretch. It was like 2 days before the deadline, and I get COVID, and I'm like, oh my God, So I negotiated the deadline out, finished the project. That went fine, but I kind of lost my faith a little bit. Has that ever happened to you? And I was like, oh my God, I should be able to do these things every time, and I couldn't do it. And so I thought, well, what can I do? And Bardon has mantras in his Key to the True Kabbalah. These are they're sounds made at a certain musical vibration, a musical note, and they are also have a color vibration, and then they do stuff. And so I was reading that book because I read all the time, and this one letter, K, was about absolute faith. Manifesting faith is what Bardon calls it. That you have to have, if you're going to do this, you have to have absolute faith that what you're intending is going to manifest. And so I did the practice for that letter, and, it just kind of grew in me. And all of a sudden, I found myself reading all of these books about the power of human intent. And that's what fueled the essay. So I read this one book by this lady named, oh God, what's her name? William Tiller. William Tiller was a physicist. Yeah, and he was at Stanford University. And he got to wondering, he was curious, does human intent actually have the power to change material things? Well, yeah, he replicated it in a laboratory setting. And what he did, his main experiment was he coated a slide and the little thing that fits on top of it with one atom thick gold on each thing. And then he sandwiched two things, gases between it. And then he had random people focus their intent, and they created what he called ion avalanches, where there was movement in the slide that was actually measurable. And he replicated that dozens of times, hundreds of times. And I'm like, yeah, that is so cool. And then I found a book called Bridging Science and Spirit, The Genius of William A. Tiller's Physics and the Promise of Information Medicine. And it's by Nisha Manak, who is a doctor. She's a MD, and she's, I think, a neurophysician. So, she wrote this book about William Tiller. Masaru Emoto's work is in it. And basically that reaffirmed my faith in my own abilities of focused intent, because I saw that other people had been able to replicate the power of focused intent on matter many, many times. Did that make sense? Yeah. And so that fueled this essay, and I asked a bunch of questions, like, what is consciousness? And what does it mean to uplift human consciousness? Because that's IONS, the Institute of Noetic Sciences, is about raising human consciousness. And I think that's one of the most important things that any of us can possibly be engaged in.
So in that essay, you talked about, there's a nice graph that you give about that maps consciousness. For anybody that is interested in it, just request through this podcast, and I'll make sure I send you a copy. But the mapping of consciousness as a way to see different, not only just see different levels, but see possibilities for what might exist out there. You want to talk about that a little bit?
I would love to talk about that. Consciousness has levels. And there was this guy named David Hawkins, and he was a psychiatrist, and he ran a huge psychiatric department in a hospital in New York City. before he decided he became enlightened, because he was practicing the psychotherapy, and he started thinking about human consciousness and the problems that many of his clients had. And so he developed this logarithmic scale, which is exponential. So like the first scale is 10, the second level is 100, then 1,000, then that's how the progression is. So each level of this log scale is an order of magnitude higher than, the lower aspects. And so it makes so much sense. If you have the essay, can you share it on the screen?
I am not sure. I haven't developed those kind of skills yet.
Yeah. I have it up. Let me try to share it. Can you give me permission to share? Look at me. I can share presentation. Oh, you have to tell me I can share.
Okay. Well, let's see. I have to go. Do I have to go to presentation or screen?
Yeah. Here we go. Upload a slide presentation. Oh God.
Well, it might be a little too complicated.
No, I don't want to do that. Okay.
Yeah.
So basically, he developed a scale. The bottom of the pyramid is shame. Shame is, well, we've all felt shame, haven't we? And you know how it feels. You know how miserable it is. And that is the lowest level. The predominant emotional state is humiliation. You're miserable. You see God as despising you, and how do you get out of that? Well, you eliminate.
Let me see if this is very old school, but.
Oh, look at you. He's going to hold it up. Okay. So go down a little further. Hold it back a little further. Okay, we're good. Okay, stop. Okay, hold it really still. So you see shame is at 20, all right? And that is humiliation. It's miserable. You're gonna, the way you get out of it is to either eliminate the shame or eliminate yourself, because it's right next to death. Then you have guilt. Then you have apathy. Then you have grief, and you're powerless. This is all external stuff that's affecting you, in your consciousness level. And then you get up to fear, and that's the fight or flight thing. And that's governed by your adrenal glands, which are actually located on top of your kidneys, did you know? And then you have desire, anger. And anger is the first healthy state. You may not think that, but it's the area where you start striking back instead of just letting it happen to you. And so you hate, you're antagonistic, you're vengeful, you're aggressive. Does that sound familiar, given the current American political environment? And then you move right up the scale. And the divine parts of this, the divine parts of human consciousness, the higher levels, the heavenly realms, are love, joy, peace, and enlightenment. And before that, you have reason. And then before reason, you have acceptance, willingness, and so you're taking control. And so basically what you're completely external. It is done to you. Whatever it is done to you. And you have absolutely no power. You work your way up through that in terms of your own personal consciousness to the point where you're angry. You've had enough. You start fighting back. You kind of take control of your own destiny. And ultimately, you encounter a lot of situations and people in your lives. And I believe that we're each born into a family, into a situation, into a culture, and we are presented with the events and situations in our own lives that force us to grow in the way that is best for us to grow in this life. And that we do that or we don't. It's always your choice. But yeah, Hawkins was a giant, and I used his model just kind of thinking about what you want to try and do. And he based it on science. He based it on kinesiology. So if you're practicing David Hawkins' thing, you can tell if somebody's lying by having them hold their arms straight out, and then you tell them, okay, if you lie to me and tell the truth, and I won't know which is which. And when they're lying, you can push their arm down. When they're not lying, you can't. It's amazing, and it's called kinesiology, or that's what he called it.
Yeah.
So
I think the name of his book that
Power versus Force.
Power and Force. Yeah,
Power versus
over Force. Is that what
Power
it is?
versus Force.
Power versus Force. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's it's a couple decades old, but it's still
It came out in 91, but his latest was written posthumously by his wife, and that's in the late teens, I think, of this century. Yeah. And so, he elaborates on the whole thing, and it's fascinating. Nisha Manek, in her book, talks about these meetings she would have with these scientists, like physicists and stuff. And one of the guys came, and they had it was like a group of 4 or 5 of them, and they were sitting, and this one guy held up a spoon and it bent, just like Kreskin. The amazing Kreskin? He bent the spoon. And she said, "What? You bent the spoon? How did you, because that's a pretty big deal if somebody bends a spoon in front of you, And she said, "Well, what's the deal?" And he said, "Well, you just got to ask the spoon for permission." And then if you remember the movie The Matrix, that the little kid, that was the spoon bender that talked with Neo, Keanu Reeves, he said, "Well, the first thing to remember about the spoon is there is no spoon." And that's a pretty profound thing if you think it through.
Well, and in fact, isn't this one of the ancient kind of precepts, concepts, I guess you could say theological perspectives of the Hindus and most of the Asian religions, that there is this kind of permeable veil between what we experience as real material life, the spoon, and what is probably defined most of the time, or at least the term used most of the time, is like spirit world, or a transcendent, more dynamic reality, different levels of reality, very similar to the kinds of maps of consciousness that you're talking about here, where some of these great ancient avatars, saints, mystics, masters have, in fact, demonstrated that, okay, maybe there is no spoon. To even take it one step further with levels of consciousness, we're all familiar with that Zen phrase, no mind. So with no mind, how do you still have a consciousness? How do you develop and grow into a more expansive, extended consciousness that might actually intersect or at least grow into cosmic consciousness, these levels of understanding and realization, recognition that may be beyond just the material world?
Well, when we consider us here now, we are constrained by time, and we are constrained by space. Those 2 factors rule our existence here. But what would happen if you were able to achieve a level of consciousness where you can operate without space and without time? See, that approaches the cosmic consciousness. Because what if this place where we have space and time is just a small little place where we come as spirits to have compressed learning experiences according to, say, a contract that you made with others that you live concurrently with? Like you and I have been friends for 40 years. I've had other friends. Some of them have passed away. Some of them are still around. But the reality is, how do we know that we're not here with each other presenting each other with these situations for all of our benefit in terms of compressed learning. And my idea is I'd like to achieve escape velocity. And the Buddhists, have that concept. They have the Mahayana Buddhists. They're bodhisattvas. So you're going to stick around, and help everybody else, and then you're going to leave. But it's nice to have the option, and to live your life in such a way where you detach yourself. Because think about this: fear drives the show for almost all of humanity. Fear of death, fear of suffering, fear of deprivation, fear of not having enough. And so we create all these distractions. So there's chaos, there's tyranny, there's distractions, addictions. I mean, our society's great for gaming and, real expensive stuff where you can just forget about everything, in the context of this video game or whatever it is that you're involved with. But that takes away your attention. That takes away your focus from your relationship with divine providence, which is what Bardon called God. And so, ideally, if you're going to be one with God, you can't serve two masters, again, using the Christian parlance, but you can't focus your life force on amassing huge amounts of wealth or huge amounts of power and still elevate your consciousness to where you're one with the divine, because you can't serve that plus the spirit of consciousness, the higher levels of consciousness. So you have these things that chain you down to the earth, and those are fear-based ego attachments, and you've got to distance yourself from those. You have to minimize those. You have to negate those. You see what I mean? Detach.
There's a tradition of cynics and skeptics about that kind of development, that level of reality, that the existence of anything that's beyond just what our material world is, and that has a tendency, Marx would say that's, kind of an opiate of the people. That's that religious distraction that deflects us from those things that are right in front of us, life and death, which represents the highest level of values. And you can go clear back to the debates between Plato and Aristotle, in their debate about metaphysics. And metaphysics in the sense of not spirituality necessarily, but in the ancient philosophical sense, it was, okay, before we can decide what is real, we have to have these kind of discussions. So meta is before physics. Before we can do physics, we have to figure out, okay, what is the real thing in physics that we're going to be studying? And of course, Plato's was, the more abstract, the more real, which would, lend itself to the kind of spirituality discussions we're having here, or cosmic consciousness, higher levels of consciousness. And Aristotle seemed to have won, at least in Western traditions, by saying, oh, no, how's that possible? Because, some of those abstractions, well, can you think of, if you're going to go more abstract from genus, from species to genus, well, those things in that abstract realm are supposed to be, the ideal world are supposed to be more perfect and well-formed, the world of forms. And anybody who's taken Intro to Philosophy probably knows this whole discussion. But anyway, the reason that Aristotle seemed to have won for the Western traditions, Western philosophical and science tradition, is that Plato couldn't come up with a good example of a perfect horse or human. Horse as, being a species. So, you can, or even the genus of horse There are lots of species of horse that you could say, oh, that's a perfect Arabian horse or, stallion or whatever. But that seemed to have won the debate on metaphysics about what is most real. And so, Aristotle's point was the more concrete, the more real, not the more abstract, the more real. So we're kind of caught in this, Bertrand Russell, famous atheist, saying, no, what is here, what's right here, right now, is what we need to be focused on. And that is all, that's enough. That's enough for us to handle, because most of the time we can't even handle what I'm
well, that's a true statement. Most of the time we can't handle very much of anything constructive.
Yeah.
But so, let me ask you a question.
So I didn't mean to put words in Bertrand Russell's mouth about, okay, that's enough. But Bertrand Russell represents one of those great cynics and skeptics and atheists who would, downplay or maybe even outright deny the existence of this kind of etheric, spiritual, cosmic, realm that we're you and I are very comfortable talking about.
Okay. Well, let them talk. Let them be skeptical. I don't care. I know what I know. I believe what I believe. And I don't feel a real need to argue that point with a skeptic, because who cares? And I don't want to sound callous there, Dan, because that's not my intent. I care about and love all people. But the thing is, if somebody says, well, you're full of it, you can change the way water freezes, la-di-da, and you replicate it. How do you know? Where are the facts? Well, that's fine. They can be that way, because all things, skepticism included, teaches us everything, whether it's positive or negative. There is learning that eventually takes place. Most human beings are doomed themselves to learn through fate. So basically you do dumb stuff, and then life beats you over the head with the consequences of that dumb stuff until you learn. That's learning by fate. Okay? Or you can try to learn through meditation and through reading and through intuition and through conversations like this. And, ultimately it doesn't matter if there's somebody who is skeptical. I'm on Facebook sometimes, and on my Facebook feed, I love pictures of like the, those nebula in the, the pillars of creation. And that's just beautiful to me. And the pictures of the earth that they have, the beautiful blue sphere, that's circling in space, and it's wonderful. And that was what started ions, is the overview effect. Astronauts viewing the Earth from space, and they just came back with a whole different perspective. But when a picture of the Earth gets posted on Facebook, guaranteed the first comment's going to be, well, the Earth's flat. Seriously, and then you go on and you see, and another one is the Earth is 6,000 years old. Don't you read the Bible? And you've got rock that has been carbon dated, billions of years. Like Numite is like billions of years old. It's a form of rock. There's always going to be a skeptic that comes out and taken to its logical conclusion. The Earth is flat because when I go out my front door, it looks flat. But it isn't. And so we can actually use higher level math to measure the roundness of the Earth, but you're always going to have somebody who's a contrarian. And most of that comes from ego, Dan, because I say, oh, I'm Pat, and I say X, and then there's going to be somebody that looks at that and just has to have their own say, and they're going to say, well, why? Okay, fine, you can have your own say. But I don't really feel a pressing need to convince anybody of anything, because everything's happening the way it should happen. And people are learning either through fate or through active means, like this Bardon hermetics thing. And so all of us are precious in the eyes of the divine, whether we're a skeptic or a flat earther or a 6,000-year-old earther or, a scientist or whatever. We're all precious in the eyes of the divine. So we just have to live and let live in terms of being tolerant toward other people's opinions. And I know that sounds kind of highfalutin, but
No,
I don't mean it that way.
This is just a slight shade on that question about cynics and skeptics. But, here we're talking about, learning and aspiring to grow a higher cosmic consciousness.
Yeah.
What about those folks? And this is kind of one of the last topics and questions that I kind of want to ask you about is the practical application of a cosmic consciousness. Why is that even something that is got any vitality or got any energy whatsoever when you could come across hundreds, thousands, millions of folks that have no interest in this kind of journey whatsoever, that are perfectly good, solid citizens, good moral people without any of these kinds of aspirations, intentions, understandings, any of that kind of stuff. What's the difference between somebody who is aspiring to have a higher cosmic consciousness, kind of attain that sort of oneness with the universe or God, and somebody who is just living a good, solid, moral life?
In terms of your daily actions, you still got to pay the bills. You're going to have to go to work. That's the way of thing. I mean, we're here, we're constrained. We have to feed ourselves, we have to clothe ourselves, we have to shelter ourselves, we have to do the whole survival thing. And so there's no real difference at that level, but I think I have never been content with, remember Jackson Browne, the musician? He sang, what was it? I'm going to run it on empty. Well, I'm going to be a happy idiot and struggle for the legal tender. And that's fine. And we have people that are they use their life force to look at the nuance of things like sports, their favorite sports team. That's fine, but there are a few people who are open to thinking in a different way about their existence and about their consciousness and about who we are and then who they are in the larger context of humanity. And, that's how I think. I have spent my entire career waging peace against economic violence. And I didn't always call it that, but I was a vocational counselor. I worked for years and years with hundreds of people, singly and in groups, who were in career transitions. They would get laid off, through no fault of their own. And I'd have people break down and weep in my office because they'd gone through their retirement and, the CEO laid them off, for short-term quarterly profits and so on. And that's, and so I used to think of it as turning people's lives around. But for the past 18 years, I've been an economist, and I have found that some of the things I can do can affect things at the policy level. Does that matter? I mean, honestly, Dan, in 120 years, there are going to be a whole different set of people. Everybody who's alive right now is going to be gone, and there are going to be a set of different people who are waging peace against economic violence, and then there are going to be a set of other people who are worried about profits, and that's just not going to change. But what changes is ourselves. And if we can have an event in our lives that wakes us up to the preciousness of other human beings and to the preciousness of life on this earth and to the idea that there may be something higher, something beyond this that's really, really good that we can aspire to. And so the uplifting of human consciousness is aspirational, but you can never, ever, ever compromise free will, because we're all free to choose what we believe in, how we believe, what we do, and that is inviolable. And so, however powerful your psyche becomes, you don't have license to press on anybody else, even through hypnosis. And you have practiced hypnosis as a hypnotherapist, but the law takes care of itself, because you cannot make somebody do something that they wouldn't normally do, even if they're under hypnosis, no matter how deep you get them. And so that's the law. And so we have to honor that law, but we have to offer people the opportunity to lift their eyes above the daily grind and see if there's something else that's good and that's noble, that can be the result of an ennobled spirit that can maybe make the world a little better because you lived. I mean, that's all we're doing here. Because, look at it this way, Dan. You're born, and if you're lucky, you're raised in a loving family. If you're even luckier, you get some education. Then you work for 50 years. And then all of a sudden, you come down with your final disease, and, your body just degenerates around you, and it becomes a shell of its former self, and then you die. Okay, that's the reality that we all face. And so what's beyond that? Is this all there is? And I guess the thing about raising consciousness, the I don't want to say litmus test because I hate that term, but the catalyst for somebody wanting to raise their consciousness is curiosity, wanting more. What's beyond this? Is there something more than my sports team? Is there something more than going to work every day? Is there something more than buying the latest car model or the best TV? I think our consumer culture saps the very purpose out of life. Because if we're thinking about, I want the new Xbox or whatever the latest video thing, I'm probably way behind because I don't game. But if you're focused on the latest car or the latest television or the latest version of a game, what are you forfeiting by putting your focus on that rather than something that's higher and perhaps better? That's my question.
Yeah. Well, I think in the episodes to come, this will be one of the themes that I want to discuss with all of our guests, is that intersection, or sometimes the disconnection between morality, ethics, and higher consciousness. If there is any a group of people over history, we've seen numerous examples of moral, good, decent, regular folks living their life and making a difference. Yep. And is there a qualitative or maybe quantitative difference between just that moral, ethical life and a life lived with a higher consciousness? And I don't know that there's a strict answer for that. There are some ways in which we can, flush that out and raise it as, like I say, a continual thread through this, because ultimately for me, that is, and I'll use the term litmus test of whether or not somebody has actually attained or is aspiring to a higher consciousness. It really indeed has to have some sort of moral, practical, ethical manifestation.
Yes,
and I think, I know that you agree with that too. So if we have someone who is manifesting a highly moral, ethical life, but has no interest whatsoever in higher consciousness, is there a way in which those intersect, overlap, represent similar kind of reality, or are there ways in which so, those are things I think we want to explore. But if you want to make a quick comment about that before we wrap things up.
I do.
Yeah, go for it.
We're not alone. You have a lower self, your parts of your brain, you have a higher self, but there is also a divine. There is a God. Whether you believe it or not, I mean, you can think of it as the Force or God or Allah or just a simple Brahman, whatever. But there is a divine power, and that divine power is not inactive. It works within each of us. And so you say, here's this person who lives the life of a saint, but doesn't aspire to higher level consciousness. How do you know? I mean, you don't know. I don't know. I'm not you. I don't know what's inside your head or your spirit, And so it's really important never to underestimate or overestimate someone else. They are who they are. And, they are every bit. It's always good to remember everybody is of equal value in the eyes of the divine, and go from there.
Yeah.
That's it.
Good. Well, Pat, this has been a lot of fun, and we might even do another couple of episodes where you and I can explore some things that we couldn't cover in an hour. But this is a good
I'd be willing.
This is a good way to launch this kind of discussion. So I'm hopeful that everybody that was able to tune into this got something of value out of it, and we will see you in the next episodes. And we're welcome aboard to our journey, and let us know if you have any feedback about what we're discussing or things that you'd be interested in hearing in the future. So farewell, everyone.